I'm Lauren. Welcome to my channel. It's so good to see you guys. Thank you guys for popping in. Make sure to subscribe if you're all about the planty awesomeness, and let's get into today's video. Welcome to another episode of What's Propping. It's a little series I like to do about once a month or so, just about propagating in general. Today we are specifically diving into 5 easiest plants to propagate. Just going to go over these 5 different plants and how to propagate them. Some of them you may know, some of them you may not know. This might kind of help you troubleshoot some areas. Keep in mind though that the best way for me to propagate them may not be the best way for you to propagate them. So make sure you take multiple cuttings and experiment just to figure out what is going to work best for you in your situation.
Alright guys, so let's talk Hoya. Hoya are actually really easy to propagate if you can get the right method for your area. Like for me personally, I live in a very humid area and I find Hoya incredibly easy to propagate if I put them in a perlite box. It's got to be a clear box with fantastic light, just some damp perlite. Let them sit there. They will root so quickly. The easiest plants to root, I swear. They are epiphytes, so they like their aeration, so you do have to open the box every once in a while. I have also been experimenting with spraying the orchid spray on the Hoya cuttings while they're in the perlite box, and it's working out really well actually. I'm getting roots within days, guys, whereas before it would take a week or two depending on the Hoya. But I'll show you how to chop some Hoya. You can see right here, you just go, you make sure that there's a node there so that it can actually grow. It's not like a peperomia. Like you and I have talked about peperomia. We've talked about peperomia before. It's not like a peperomia in the sense that you could just take a chunk of stem, or a begonia where you can take a chunk of stem and just shove it anywhere and it will magically grow leaves and roots. Hoya are particular. They need a node in order to make the leaves. So when you are making these cuts, you want to make sure that you have this node right here. And then you just set it down in the perlite gently. You make sure that the perlite's a little damp. You seal it up, and then voila, in a couple of days you have some roots. This is the orchid mix, or the orchid food spray. I've been spraying it on my Hoya as was recommended by Greenhouse Girl 94 on Instagram. I think everybody's kind of jumping on that brilliant trend right there because the lady is right. It totally works. I'm just taking it a step further and spraying it on my cuttings, and it's mind-blowingly awesome, guys. Highly recommend you give these plants a try. Tradescantia, I'm not going to give you an overview of how to cut them and all that. I have a whole video right up here for that if you guys want. They root within days if you shove them in some water or you shove them in some soil and you just keep spraying them every once in a while and just keep them damp. They don't like water on their leaves. Do not give them a super humid environment. They will be okay in humid environment, but do not go out of your way to do it because it doesn't help them. They are incredibly easy to root. You just cut them and stick them in the water and call it good, guys. And I don't have to tell you how amazing Tradescantia are, so I'm just gonna leave it there. You guys try it. It's an easy way to make a whole full pot. Got a whole video of it. So we're just gonna move on to the next one now. Alright, so the next one is Monstera. Monstera deliciosa in particular is the next one. It is awesome, guys. It's an amazing plant. It grows incredibly quickly. If you want to propagate it, you do want to make sure that you're chopping off at a node. And one thing to keep in mind when you're chopping Monstera, they will root pretty easily in some water. I have not personally tried soil. I always root them in water and it works out really well. I see roots in a couple of days as long as I have the node there. Another thing to keep in mind with Monstera is when you take these cuttings, just because you're getting a very big fenestrated leaf and you're chopping it off, it's gonna put out baby leaves, guys. It might give you fenestrated leaves a little bit faster down the road, but the next leaf that pops out of that after it's rooted is not going to be fenestrated. So it's just something to keep in mind with that. I will eventually do a Monstera care video, but that's just something to keep in mind there, just so you know, since we're specifically talking about propagating them today. So you would just go and you would make a cut right here. Here is a rooted cutting that I have for you so you can kind of see. It's put out a whole new leaf just chilling in a vase of water. I really need to pot this guy up, but it's just a great plant. It's super easy to propagate. Snip it off at the node, just shove it in some water, just leave it alone, let it look pretty. I gave mine bright direct morning light. I know people have given them bright afternoon light as well, and it's done just fine. So give them all the light you can, and it'll root quicker with more light and less quickly with less light. Also, make sure that if you are using water, tap water, try not to use water that has high chemicals like fluoride and chlorine. It's also nice if you don't use distilled water either, because if you use distilled water, they suck all the minerals out of it, and then there's nothing for the plant to soak up, and they won't last as long in it, and you'll have to change it out more often. Just something to keep in mind with that. I know quite a few people that have ended up rotting their plants because they did either of those things. So just something to keep in mind. You can always go and check your water. There are websites for your water suppliers. We have a well, so I don't have to worry about that personally. You can go to your local city, district, whatever, water corporation. They'll tell you exactly what's in the water for your area as far as fluoride and chlorine go. And then you can make a decision based on that information for your rooting of said plants in the water, if that makes sense. So, Fittonia, I know I talked about them in my last video. I'm really harping on them. I just got a new one. Bear with me here. A lot of people don't know that you can just take a cutting of Fittonia. You can either root it in water. I have had the most success rooting it in sphagnum. Shoved it in sphagnum, covered it with plastic wrap in a clear Tupperware container, and I just let it sit. I didn't even put it in direct light. I didn't put it in pure darkness either, but I just set it wherever I felt like it and moved it around 50 bazillion times, and it rooted. Within a couple of days, pushed out new growth. So just something to keep in mind there. Also, when you go and you cut your Fittonia, it will divide it and split it, and just like peperomia, it will create more shoots. So it's a way to get a more bushy plant if you wish. But yes, super easy. It grows rather quickly. I'd say you can have a full-grown plant within a month and a half, 2 months max, especially doing it this way, especially doing it in the moss. So highly recommend you give that a shot if you happen to be super into Fittonia, since I won't stop talking about them. Sorry guys. Alright, so next up we have Begonia. I talked about them a little bit earlier in the video. They're very similar to peperomia in the sense that you can just take a cutting, you can use half a leaf, you can use a stem, whatever part of the plant that you can grab, it can make new roots, and it whatever part of the plant you can grab, as long as it's not just a root, it can grow more leaves, and it can grow more roots and grow a full plant just from a stem cutting or a leaf cutting. In particular, Rex Begonia have been really easy for me to go ahead and root this way. So far, they prefer being put in a glass jar with a see-through lid and just a leaf with a short stem attached. Just shove it in that little jar with sphagnum moss that's been pre-dampened and wrung out, and it'll root within a week and a half. I had roots on all of the ones that I put in there. I have also rooted them in water, but it takes longer in my experience. Like, it's been almost 2-3 weeks for a cutting that I have just rooting in water, and I'm just now starting to see some roots. I also feel like light has a huge part in the rooting process if we're going to be using full-on leaves and not keeping them in like a darker moist soil type of situation. I've noticed when I put them in brighter light, as long as it's some type of filtered bright light, not directly open, shoved out in the middle of nowhere, you know, it will root faster. And if I have it under just a little LED light bulb grow light, it does not root as fast. So I think both the light and the medium play a huge key factor in that decision as far as what the plant wants to do. I always highly recommend that if you get a begonia, you immediately get a cutting from it and you start rooting it right away, because you never know what's going to set the begonia off or what the conditions it came from was like. So in order to have a backup plant in case that one tanks really quickly, you want to make sure you get that cutting as fresh and healthy as possible. so that it can be rooted, and by the time your other one is dead, you can have a working one. All right, that's not like optimum conditions, you know, that's not the optimum way to think about it. But the reality is that a lot of begonia tend to die in the average household until we figure out their conditions. So they're one of the most struggled with plants next to ferns. I myself still struggle with them quite a bit, even though I have about 15 of them. So it's just something that we need to be realistic about. When we bring home a begonia, get that cutting, start it rooting, however you want to root it. Personally, the moss is the best way to go, but it is a really easy way to just root it in the water too. As long as you're giving it some good light, it will be fine, guys. And then begonia are incredibly susceptible and finicky with the chemicals in the water. So like I talked about before, make sure you figure out and you try to use some type of filtered room temperature water when you're filling up the, when you're moistening the moss and when you're filling up the little water propagation things.
Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Go out there, propagate all your plants, and then go to Instagram and tell me all about it, because I want to see all your planty awesomeness, okay? It's down below at That Awkward Plant Girl. As always, I got 2 more videos right here for you guys to watch, and I hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!